Before, after, before, after.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Hello, Tim Aslin.
Hello, Ryan McDuffie.
And hello, everyone. Welcome to Dismembering Horror, episode 165 of Dismembering Horror, the podcast show where myself, the name you just heard, Ryan McDuffie, and the other name you just heard.
Oh, myself, Tim Aslin.
That's right. We dismember a horror film for you every week. And we do, well, what does dismembering even mean, Tim? Everyone listening, if this is your first time or if this is a long time, maybe you can say it better than I can.
Well, you know, if a film is a human body, you know, and like the arm is the first act and the leg is a thing we liked and the head is a thing we didn't like, we kind of just chop all those parts off throughout the show. You know what I'm saying? We dismember it. We dismember the body that is the movie.
So you mean we talk about what worked for us, what did not work for us, and anything else we found interesting or noteworthy?
That's right. About a horror film.
Yeah, and by that you also mean that we're doing it all in the spirit of friends getting together and just trying to gleam all that can be gleamed, whether it be in the filmmaking sense or a thematic meaning mining life sense out of horror films.
Yeah, emphasis on spirit. No, spirit.
As in ghostly spirits?
That's right.
Ooh, cool. And as we if you're listening to this live, you'll find this in October 2021. And this marks our episode 3 out of our series of 3s that we're doing for this month. So to celebrate Halloween, the Halloween season, the spooky season, we thought it'd be fun to to touch on as we're doing the big franchises and along the way focus on the 3s, the third entries in each franchise. And so today's film, Halloween Kills, which we're going a little out of order if you tuned in to our first episode on Friday the 13th, but we changed it anyway. Halloween Kills, it's technically the third entry in the new, what is called, I guess, the Halloween 40 canon. I've seen it called that.
Right.
But it is the second one in the new 3 films that are coming out. So maybe if we plan this a little better, we would have been doing this next year. But it's still technically true in a certain regard. Halloween Kills, the third film in a chronology.
Let me just let's for clarity's sake, let's just get this clear. There have been 13, count them, 13 Halloween movies in total. 11 of those 13 movies are somehow connected to the original. But one of those 11 doesn't have Michael Myers in it. That's the one we're going to do next week.
Yes. And so we're actually doing, so next week we're doing the other Halloween 3.
So if Rob Zombie were to make a third installment of his 2, we could add that to the list of 3s. But technically, this movie we did, Halloween Kills, is really a 2. It's really a 2.
Yeah. Which is funny if Rob Zombie did make a third one, we could essentially make this all about the third Halloween films versus just the third films in the major franchises. There'd be enough.
No kidding.
Anyways, but it's fun. We're saving these last 2, which are the Halloween in title films, for the end of the month because we are now closer to Halloween than ever. Great. So Tim, I'm so excited to get into this character and this film. Where did you end up seeing it?
I saw it at the Glendale, the Americana app brand.
Great. They're back in action.
What is that? I think it's an AMC.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, I mean, there's so much I want to say, but I think in order to do that, we got to start how we always do with the trailer. So are you ready for that?
Sure.
All right. Here we go. The trailer from the delayed film, now seeing its release in 2021, sequel to Halloween, threequel to Halloween and Halloween. Here is Halloween Kills.
No, 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 let it burn!
Benton, you copy? I can't see you! Take my hand now! Burn it! Grab my hand!
My grandmother was right. The boogeyman was real.
It's over.
You can't hurt anyone ever again.
No one told you.
Told me what?
Somebody in there?
Michael Myers is alive.
All right. Well, as always, I'm so glad I didn't watch the trailer. I mean, I think that's a given these days, whatever.
Yeah.
All right, Tim. All right, everyone listening. What's next here? We rate it after the trailer. Per our rating system, would Tim and I, talking to ourselves, tell ourselves to avoid this film, stream this film, rent this film? In the spirit of these franchises often go, tell us to buy it in a box set, or would we straight up tell us to buy it? Tim, who do you want to go first?
You.
All right. Tim, this is a hands down buy it for me. I was floored by how good this movie was. At least to me. I'm trying to make heads or tails of, I didn't really read any in-depth middling reviews, but like some of the like top bad reviews for it were just the sort of same old you see for every horror movie of like, doesn't do a lot of new with the franchise, which I was making that complaint about that complaint with the Friday the 13th movies, being more like in a what do you expect way.
Right.
But for this one, it just really feels like I was just watching a completely different movie. Like, God, I mean, how do I just put, like, just the short of it in summary, I guess, is I was just amazed how they took what Michael Myers is and represents and contextualized him in our modern world.
Yep.
And transcended the slasher genre even, but like stayed true to being horrifying and the roots of it all. Like I could not believe this movie. This is more than a box set buy for me. It's a buy it. I'm like just nervous, excited with how good this was. And that a lot of it could be too the middle movies and trilogies. I don't know, a lot of times my favorites, this is the places they go. But anyway, I will go on in our what worked section, but there you go. There's the short of it.
Yeah, I'm the same for the most part. Like, I don't think it's a film without things to criticize. But like, I had an exceptionally fun time watching it. I was extremely excited by exactly what you're talking about, taking the essence of what any of these movies have kind of been built on and expanding that out into the broader metaphor in our like current state of affairs in the US in particular. And I was like, oh, like actual subtext and, socio-political like context and like reference and like illusion or whatever. Like, so that was exciting to me. What else? I was in the theater loud. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many moments that I was like outwardly like, holy shit. So for me, that's a big deal. Like, it's kind of what it's the response that I want evoked when I go to this type of movie. So
right.
I mean, what more? I don't know what I've seen so much, because now I'm really trying to scroll through Twitter and kind of engage there. And it is a remarkable, I don't even know how to describe the way people are responding to this. I think it's partially just what people do on Twitter and just say, nah, this sucked. But like, people do not, there's a lot of dislike of this movie on Twitter. And I'm pretty surprised, to be honest, because yes, it has things that I can see people not liking, fine. But it's like ridiculously fun front to back horror. Like, what do you want?
Right. I mean, and I'll say too, this another thing, we'll get to more of, but just overall, like, doing everything you want from a sequel, I thought, of like expanding on this sort of story and the night and the characters and just this initial, all stemming out from this initial 1978 event. Like, yeah, it just checks those boxes too. And you're right, when it comes down to it, it's a Halloween movie. I was sitting there and all like the stabs and gore moments just made me cringe in like the way that you want and expect with these films. So
yeah,
across the board, man.
Like, what are? This is why I think I'm tempted to say that the vast majority of the people who are like, this sucked, meh, are quite literally just doing that to get people to react to that reaction.
I wonder,
because none of them say why.
Well, yeah. Well, that's where you go for Letterboxd, I guess. You got to go beyond Twitter.
Oh yeah, I mean,
see
no kidding.
Any other more just like built-in review websites? I don't know. I know it's near and dear for both of us, like any film that gets into an angry mob situation.
Yeah.
And to have that done, like, I just wonder if, like, did people not, are the people who, this is just making such leaps and bounds, but people who hated it, are they the angry mob? Do they not get it? Like the angry mob moments? Like, I just don't see how you, I mean, I'm curious.
I could speculate that how do I put this delicately, or why would I even bother putting it delicately? I would suspect that there's certain people who, like, for example, my girlfriend, like, during some of the, like, as the kind of context of the mob mentality started to grow throughout the movie, and you start to go, oh, this feels familiar, and relating it back to things like the insurrection on January 6th and like that kind of feeling, I'm sure she was like, I'm triggered in a joking way, but she's like, this is what that is, right? It's that same feeling. And I bet there's a lot of people out there who really don't want that type of thing in their quote unquote their horror movies, because you see that a lot. They're like, oh, why is everything politicized? It's like, well, everything is politicized because we live in the world, right? Like, everything has to do with everything that's going on around us, one way or the other. So it's kind of a silly argument to be like you see this a lot in comic book conversation right now. People being like, oh, now comic books are like failing because they're all becoming politicized. It's like, just a reminder to everybody, comic books are built on politicization, if that's a word.
Well, it's like,
so it's just crazy to me that people,
yeah,
I think people get wound up very easily in our current world. And maybe that's always been true, but you have access to other people getting wound up, and you can start having this like echo chamber conversation on Twitter or wherever. And that leads to just people being like, "Meh, you're ruining my thing."
I'm just trying to want to phrase it in a way that's like, you don't have to use the word politics. You could say it's a mirror of, like, these films act as a mirror of our humanity.
Exactly.
Like, that's like, and of course politics are going to be wrapped up in that.
That's right. I mean, and that's sort of what I mean when I say it's like, dude, like, welcome to planet Earth. Like, it's not everything is politicized because we live in the world. It's not like somebody sitting there going like Mr. Burns, like tapping their fingers together going, how can I get under the skin of the MAGA crowd? It's like, that's not like, maybe that's the intention sometimes, but like, take a chill pill, everybody. It's a horror film. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to get under your skin. It's supposed to evoke some stuff.
I know. I think I always try to, like, I don't actually know, but when I see like a tarot card Instagram or something that uses the term like looking at your shadow self, and I'm like, what exactly, like, I think I get that. I haven't heard someone who's in that world explain it, but like, just from knowing movies and writing and stories, like, yeah, I think I get what that is. And I just think that's what this movie just dives headfirst into, and apparently the next one will even more of, like, it's like what they talk about, which I don't, in the film itself, of the evil within us. And, it's not Michael Myers who's it's our fear of him itself. Like, we're getting ahead of ourselves here. It's all great. I'm all excited. This is
agreed.
Well, let's keep up the great excitement then. We can't jump right into what worked because, Tim, we got to talk about what even happened in this film. Let's just give us some context.
Okay.
What was Halloween Kills?
I think it's three things. I think this is why a lot of people are upset, is because there are three different main components to this movie that are all coalescing. Is that the right word? Coalescing? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
to sort of the broader picture. So, number one, we have flashback context of the night that Laurie Strode survived Michael Myers. And so we just get a bigger context of the town, the state of Haddonfield on that night, and sort of other people that night impacted. And that's kind of sprinkled throughout. So it's cool. It's like you get to meet Hawkins, the cop, as a young cop, and how that night affected him. You get to meet a couple of the little kids, one of which is the dad of what's her name? Andy Matichak's character.
Yeah, Allison.
Oh, right, Allison. Allison's not so cool boyfriend's dad had a run-in with Michael on that night back in the day, 40 years earlier. Tommy and Lindsay
sounds right.
I think is right. We get to meet them as adults, right? And like we remember
Tommy
them
Wallace,
from the
Lindsay
first one.
Wallace.
They were the kids that Laurie was babysitting. So you get this kind of bridge of context in flashbacks from other people's perspectives on the original night that Michael went on his little spree. So that's really cool, and that comes back around. Number two is the effect of the actual present day last night, Halloween night of the 2018 movie, and how that's affecting the Strodes. Everybody's in dire straits. Laurie is gutted. They got to go
literally
to the hospital.
and figuratively, yeah.
Right. And everybody's like, damn, he's still out there. We got to go. We got to get him. And three is the current effect that night is having on Michael when we find out that he survived the house being burnt down. He goes on another rampage. And that evokes this sort of bigger context of the town getting together to be like, we're not going to let this happen again. So the trauma of the original night is revivified 40 years later by the other town members that were alive back then and the current town members that never experienced that. They're experiencing it for the first time. So all of that's coming together to create this sort of almost crazed set of circumstances for the quote unquote good guys, the townsfolk. And it just turns into total chaos. Meanwhile, Michael's just he's rampaging through Haddonfield pretty much just so he can get home. He's just trying to get to his childhood home. And that seems to, or the movie's kind of implying that that's always been his goal, is that he's not necessarily ever been maliciously killing people. He's just taking down anything that's in his way to getting to his childhood home.
Kind of, sort of. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to kill the people if they aren't like literally in his way. He is
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's the idea set up in this film that his sister's room is like his safe space. So all he is comfortable doing in this world is just staring out the window at the world.
Right. Yeah, it creates kind of this interesting conversation about like what's his deal, which has always been, I think, a really big part of the Halloween movies, right? Like there's no real answer. There's a lot of different takes, whether it be from the characters in the film, the filmmakers, or the fans. But there's no definitive answer as to like what Michael's issue is.
I think the key into making meaning out of it is that I'm sort of listening to you for the first time and just thinking about it more in the context of that he was once a kid, like, and a more human kid. I think that a lot can be gleaned from that.
Yeah. Yeah, let's get into what worked here, because that's I think the first thing I want to kind of dive into.
Okay, great. Well, all right, we'll figure it out. I had another thing that could be good to check up with in our references of where we're at in the other two films we've watched in the franchises.
Hit me with it, Ryan.
Great. Well, okay, no, we'll jump into what worked. We'll sort it out. Here we go. Stay with us, folks. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Tim, you're right. Sorry to ruin. That was a great transition, but it's just that I feel like we got to zoom out as far as possible for these covering these franchises and, segue into the movie itself or whatever. But like, we're looking at this in the context of the other two major horror franchises and their characters, their lead villains, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees. So we already talked sort of at length about comparing those two.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe touched on Michael Myers a little bit, but like, yeah, how do you suss out what Michael Myers is and how is he different from those other two? And, assuming that will be a what worked sense.
It is. I mean, it's this totally wrapped up in what I was driving at here. I'm not sure I have an answer, to be honest, but I think the non-definitive aspect of Michael Myers is the definitive aspect of Michael Myers. That's what makes him the sort of the scariest in a lot of ways, is that we really don't know why he's doing this. Unlike Freddy and Jason, who have very clear motives, as we discussed previously. Jason is effectively a embodiment of a grief revenge curse, and it's magical and it's a curse, and we talked about that. Freddy is more of a revenge magical being, but he's totally malevolent, right? Like he, from start to finish, he's not the product of a wrongdoing unless you consider the parents of dead children killing you a wrongdoing, right? So he's totally wrapped up in malevolence, right? Evil, like just the dark side of humanity. Michael is neither of those things. He's magical to some degree, but he's not the product of anything insofar as an exterior event. He's a totally interior character and monster, if you will. And so I think what makes him so scary is that he was a kid and he was already, for unknown reasons, driven to kill. And that question of like, why does anybody at any age, I guess, kill, being encapsulated in a kid and then having that gestate in an asylum for 40 years it's just like down the rabbit hole, right? Like it's compounding not only the question of why, but the piling on of distance from empathy.
Yeah, well, with all these guys, there's something, I think, as horrible as what they do, I think there's something deeply human about them in a way too. As far as like, okay, I mean, you could say, I mean, he's the non-human. So hear me out. What I'm saying, like he's the shark amongst them, you know, the boogeyman amongst the Michael Myers. But as far as when you take that context of him being a kid and like what you just said, killing his sister, and you sort of say, well, why is he doing that? I mean, my kind of like speculation to that is, you know, the same idea of like him looking out the window in his sister's room. It's a safe place. He represents sort of being that kid self who's just afraid of change and doing what's scary, going outside your bubble, you know, but a life should be always about ever so gradually pushing that bubble as much as we can in our short lifetimes here. So, I mean, him killing his sister is like, it was pretty much in response to his sister having a boyfriend, like that, as if that was some big scary world to him,
or just,
you know?
his sister growing into a woman and not being a child anymore. Like there's something in there like that's never really like outwardly explored, but it's like it's built into that original scene. Like she's got her shirt off there. It's like seems fairly either post or pre-coitus kind of moment for her with her boyfriend. So there's a sexualization happening of her in that maybe he's responding to. It's not explicit, but that I think we can make that leap. Yeah.
Well, what did you think? I mean, I used the word the boogeyman. I was curious, do you think that is the most appropriate for Michael Myers?
Even I think this movie solidifies that the most of any of them, because it gives the context of what the boogeyman term means to us as a society. And I gotta be honest, like I always thought of Michael as sort of just an unstoppable, like, evil force. And now with these movies, I'm like, oh man, he's kind of just the product of incarceration, right? Like, think about the idea of a 6-year-old being immediately imprisoned in isolation for doing something horrible.
Well, if you looked at like how I set up that context of it's Arrested Development is, what sort of caused him to do that murder in the first place. You are just putting a hard arrested on his development when you do that.
Right. So if that's the context that we're starting at, of course, the broader implication is that society did that to him. A kid, well, I don't know if you can call him innocent or necessarily, but like, let's just say anybody at that age they're not like, they shouldn't be held to the standard of an adult, right? I mean, just generally speaking, brains are weird. Like, little kids do crazy stuff, like little kids will bite you. Like, they don't know what the hell is going on. And so if you just magnify that upwards into the worst thing, sure, I can conceive of a little kid grabbing a knife and stabbing his sister and really, really not understanding what's going on. Like, there are brains out there that's going to be the case with that can be salvaged. It's not like that can't be helped. But in our society, in 1978 society, the answer was, well, even further back, right? Because it would have been what year did that initial killing happen? Like 65, I think, or something like that. He was 6 in 65, which made him 20 whatever in 78. So in 1965, a 6-year-old kills his sister with a knife, and society said, like slap their hands together, throw away the key. Like, not dealing with that. And so I think that's actually really fascinating. What does happen to somebody in that circumstance? And the movie says this.
Yeah, I mean, it ties into where, like, it's still accurate to put it in the way that Michael Myers is often put, like they say in the movie. His evil, like pure evil, represents pure evil. So it's just sort of the context we're talking about it here, though. It's like, also looking at it as he represents the evil in all of us. So he almost represents a what if of like, what if you took that evil in us all and only stoked the flames of it?
They incubated it. They literally incubated the evil act or the terrible act that this 6-year-old did. And then they're mad that when he gets out, he just like it's like plows through people. It's like, I don't know, did you expect something different? That's the thing that I really like, and I like about, to sort of bring it back to this movie, the flashbacks in this movie giving us a little bit more of Loomis and a little bit more of just the reaction of people is, I think, really helpful to kind of just seeing Michael as a person in a way. Because, like, Loomis is so determined to say, just eradicate it. He's evil. It's evil. He's evil. Like, pure evil, just eradicate it. And
in an old school kind of way, I want to note.
In a what?
Old school kind of way.
And having Hawkins stop Loomis from killing him, which probably wouldn't have worked anyway. But either way, having Hawkins stop that, having Hawkins show a little bit of humanity, and then feeling guilt over that is really, it becomes complex. But at the end of the day, I think it's just giving us this sense of like everybody around Michael, society, the individuals are kind of, they're defining him, right? And this is murky because he's also doing horrible things. But I think a lot of where this movie is coming from, and maybe the originals had this to some degree, is nobody's asking why. They're just, like we've talked about a lot, there's this certitude of, well, he's just evil, so eradicate him. But nobody is asking the question why he is the way he is.
I will bring up that was I don't know if you watched it before this, but I revisited Halloween 2018.
I did.
And okay, great. Well, that's those podcaster characters at the beginning of that one, I feel like represent the attempt to understand why.
And
but
maybe a misguided attempt, but
right, exactly. So it is why it's tricky territory.
It is because then you in 2018 one, you also have the doctor character, the new Loomis, being an insane person. And so it is a deconstruction of these tropes, sort of saying like, you know what? Nobody's really good and nobody's really bad. That everybody's just a mess. And I think that's really cool. So then moving into this one, suddenly you've got this other broader like zoom out to be like, okay, well, how is this all affecting society? And let's just use Haddonfield as a microcosm of society. And that, to me, that's so exciting to see the question of how it's affecting society put up against the question of who Michael Myers is. Like, and then having the rest of the movie just kind of be like, well, let's see what happens. Like when you put those two things together, like you step back from everything and just watch that unfold, it's wild. So I don't know. I don't think I've actually answered your question at all, but my takeaway is that Michael's the mystery around who and what Michael is what makes him compelling as a big bad.
Yeah.
Whereas there is no mystery with the other two.
Right. Yes. Agreed. That's great. Well, there's, I mean, you just touched on a bit of everything.
Yeah.
So to wrap up, I guess some more like observational things about unique Michael Myers things, and then to get into all that other stuff too. So many rich themes at play here. But Michael Myers is some things that struck me this time about him compared to the other two, thinking of him as like the Zen one in a way, where like you could say they're all pretty immediate in just having fun. You could say that's a Zen thing, right? But something, that when we hear that word Zen, like the way he, like when his victim's running away and he just kind of walks after them, there's something just so like he's, I mean, that's the word Zen, but it's like how I don't know how to put it. It's like he is very immediate. He's very present, but he's not. It's not like he's obsessed for like selfish reasons. It seems like, it really is that sense of like, in that terms of Zen, it's like the doing your Dharma thing. Like this is what he was meant to do on some level,
right? And
he can do it calmly. And if it works out or not, he's not concerned. He doesn't have that sort of pent up anger obsession that Jason Voorhees has.
Right.
He doesn't have the manic, way, or that you could say Freddy has too, actually. So that's something that struck me unique about him.
Well, I don't think he's taking pleasure in any of it either. He's so neutral that it's almost like he's just a really earnest guy. He's like, I'm just doing my thing, man.
Well, it's like,
although he does have a sense of humor.
Well, that's why I was just wondering if is it a sense of humor, or is it more akin to like if he's a kid torturing insects or animals? Is it just kind of like laying out the bodies in a circle afterwards,
right.
Just kind of like doing a weird kind of just almost not like playing in a fun sense, but like playing with your food in a just kind of just, in almost a human sense. I don't know.
Actually, I would say this movie more than any other one solidifies the idea, and they really explicitly say this at one point, the idea that he is a 6-year-old in a adult, hyper powerful, maybe even probably magical body. And so if for nothing else, you have to always take him for that fact. He's a 6-year-old. There's a 6-year-old brain inside of all of what's going on. So everything starts there. Now, going down the pathway of like what makes him magical is a whole nother thing. I don't think actually that has anything to do with Michael. And I mean, this movie is saying it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah. Well, a couple things wrap up on Michael Myers, and then you transitioning into magical. We'll do that here. So I just remembered and liked how you said about, I think all of them at some point, like all three of them are hams, I think is how you put it, or at least for some of them, that's where you see it. Whether it's like,
they are.
Freddy obviously being Freddy, Jason, like, being unique in his kills, throwing bodies through windows just to scare someone.
Right.
That is, put it in the context of Michael Myers, and you say he's a 6-year-old, where it does feel like it's, I don't know, it's to remind you like he you could say he's not just, I don't know, it's sure maybe he is just like evil incarnate, but there's a human element to him too. Like, I mean, where the probably furthest that's been pushed in any of the movies with him, they did this movie where it's like, didn't he start the record in the old house, the couple that he kills? Like, he must have started that record after killing the couple and, putting their bodies together. But when you imagine it, like you said, from the level of a 6-year-old, it's almost just like, oh, a record player. I haven't seen one of these. I'm going to put it on. It's not necessarily like he's being like a Freddy would kind of, find glee from the lyrics of the song, putting it in this black context. But yeah, Michael Myers is different in that sense, but still can come across as him when he's like testing out the knives in the back of the corpse. Yeah. Oh God, like all that stuff. It's all to say, hams or not, it's just something about Michael Myers. You get that child sense of humanity still that's in there.
Well, and I would further that, whatever you want to call it, that idea along and say that you could kind of just correlate everything he does to children's games. He really likes peekaboo.
Yeah.
Right? He really likes hide and seek. He likes to play with the dolls. Mm-hmm. He likes to toy around with various things. Like he likes to like in this one, he climbs up on the roof of a car. Every kid loves climbing on a roof of a car.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of one of his signature moves, actually.
Right. Like, so in a way, I feel like that's kind of just who he is, man. He's a 6-year-old. It's like if you took a 6-year-old and removed the fear of reprimand and then put him in an adult body, what does that look like?
That's why he's just so perfect representing the evil in us all. That's just like that's sort of that's a lot of that's what like facing your shadow self is like, oh God, like what would I have done, in a world without reprimand? Like, is that, would I have been a good, like you I don't know, you look at that side of yourself left, the unaffected, anyway. Well, magic, Tim.
Well, so what I wanted
to say,
the bridge between those two things is how society reacted to him as a kid.
Yeah.
And that in the same kind of ways, I guess you could make the same argument that we made for Freddy and Jason. That act of society is what blossomed the curse, the magical aspect of it. Taking a kid and throwing him in a cell and locking it up and throwing away the key is it's the sin or the sin of society that the curse was born out of.
Well, yes, I
agree. In the same way that like Jason's mother getting killed is the thing that created him, in the same way that Freddy being, burnt to death by a group of angry parents is what created him.
Right. Well, real quick to give the context, when we say magic, we're talking about how the fact that bullets don't seem to kill him, He's he's unaffected by that. In fact, what they say in the first one, it only makes him stronger.
Yeah.
So I think this can work alongside what you're saying, but I think a more like Michael Myers spin on like what the sort of his supernatural abilities might be is when you look at him from what they always say, what we already said, he's representing evil incarnate, the evil in us all. That's something you can't kill.
Laurie says it in this movie.
Yeah.
I think it's in a voiceover right toward the end. She says, he's flesh and blood, but you cannot kill him with brute force.
Right. So we'll find out in Halloween Ends how, assuming it ends. But okay, here's to kind of tie
I have a whole theory about that, which I'm very excited to talk about.
Great. Well, my whole theory on just kind of what I most gleamed out of the themes tying directly to the idea of how do you defeat Michael Myers if he represents evil, and if you come from that evil mob mentality place, evil ends tonight, evil dies tonight, you're somehow only making him stronger. How do you deal with that? That's what I see like is our sort of real jumping off point. I mean, there's so many ways to do that. I just have to start touching on it with this big one, but I put it as like your trauma is a big word for these films, right?
Yeah.
So you look at sort of, in the example in this film, the angry, insatiable mob who thinks they're doing good, though, mind you. You could look at sort of that coming from the anger place as a manifestation of that collective and individual trauma, right? But sort of to put it in the context of what we were saying, like how this is being put in today's context, I think we're at a really interesting point where we're just so ripe to have a mob scene like this. It's like as potent as ever. I'm so glad we had it. But I think it's especially interesting right now because we've reached a sort of point where we have to completely change our kind of like societal outlook approach that there's no other like countries now. There's no enemies right now. If we want to actually quote, we have to defeat the evil within us, which
right.
can sound not practical, but it like is what's going on. And there are practical approaches to that. So you say like that for me, I really take to heart that means building a world based on nonviolence, right? And violence can mean physical violence, but it can also just mean that sort of separateness or anger or, anything like that, separation from the other. So that's what makes this character, Michael Myers, so interesting right now. When you have something that is just a pure killing machine, well, what do you do with it? And I think...
Give him a hug.
Right, but so we know like you can't, and that's why I think we're so sort of caught up on like you could use, he represents our historical examples where I feel like World War II stopping Hitler's rise to power was kind of the last just war, but that all changed. Like I think history changed with the dropping of the bomb, the atomic bomb, to say like this is what we've reached capability wise. So we're just going to have to figure out how to start moving the exact opposite direction, and we've kept up war since then. And I know this is all sounding grand and societal and whatever, but that is just why I'm so excited for this film because it brought up these things really interesting way. But so you have a sort of old world idea, Loomis is coming from, whether he's right or wrong, just kill Michael Myers, shoot him in the head. But you think but we aren't going to look back at our World War II heroes and be like, oh, what were you doing? You were killing people, it's a different world, So I think Laurie, it's what she says all along. She says it has to be her to kill Michael Myers. And I think that's part of, she's the older generation here, representing that older generation from the original murders, she's the grandmother of the situation.
Hawkins backs her up with that sentiment too. He takes that on as well. His generation, same generation as her, and Tommy kind of, and Lindsay and sort of the mob, they're like the next tier down of that same mentality of like, we got to just just destroy him.
Well, it's a way for grandma to tell her granddaughter, like, hey, like, you have to be, it's on you guys to do something different. I'm still a part of this old world that maybe there is a final battle in place that a last act of violence, you could say requires. I mean, that's the interesting philosophical territory, but that's what it gets into. And I think it just explores all that so well with having that idea. Laurie has to be the one to kill Michael. I think that's incredible. And I able just to chew on all that thanks to it,
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like, where to go from there?
Well, I mean,
well, let's talk about a little bit like more. I think for me, the takeaway of what you're talking about in regards to this, the metaphor of his evil and what Laurie says, like I actually don't remember if Laurie is the one who says it, but you can't kill evil with evil. That bigger picture to me is really a way of saying, which she says, you can't use force to, I mean, you can, but when you use force to combat force, you're just adding to the problem.
It's like in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, we can't deal with her freaking out, give her sedatives.
Right. And so that's just a universal theme, right? Like we see that kind of arc often where the altruism that a character needs to achieve often is achieved by the character putting down the weapon and saying, actually, no, I've got it wrong. Like, I can't keep fighting this. And watching a character let go of that notion is usually the most compelling moment. A dramatic example of that is Good Will Hunting, right? Will Hunting is this kind of antisocial, like, whatever. And he needs Robin Williams' like therapy. And the moment of Robin Williams being compassionate and saying it's not your fault to him is very evocative. Like, it makes him angry and like upset and borderline violent. But he has to go through that to understand it. And it's extraordinarily moving, right? I could kind of see that same model used with Michael, where it's like Laurie's so determined to say we have to destroy it because she's reacting to like how you react when you get bit by a dog, right? Like a thing lashed out and your reaction often is to lash back and like whatever, like kick the dog away from you or whatever. But that we know that doesn't work. Like, we humans know, and yet we keep doing it. And so
it
like,
worked
to your
up
point,
till a point in history, yeah.
Right. To your point, up until this moment where you, as a society, as humanity, has to finally agree that maybe that's not working. And we do. Like, we are moving in that direction. We've been moving in that direction for a long time. Now, there have been cultures in the history of humans that I think were pretty close to already getting that and cultivated it. And what happened to them? They got mowed down by the other thing. And so it's a treacherous thing or stance to take, to be like, actually, we're going to come from a place of empathy and compassion and passivity and try to hone that as a society.
Well, you get people's fear and hesitation around doing just that because it is stepping into an unknown, and kind of like what this movie explores. It's it's not a clean transition,
No.
whatever it would be, and it's murky territory. And I think what I love, just getting to, you can touch on the mob even more. Like, we know they're well intentioned, but I don't want to say it, like the sort of, as far as that anger in ourselves, maybe we're all trying to deal with at other groups of people or whatever. It's sort of that mob represents like that part of us that no matter how horrible those other people, like if whatever they may believe that we just totally disagree with or detest, that, just triggers us so much, sets us off so much, to go to some sort of other place that could actually, allow you to communicate or empathize with them on some level. The sort of mob represents that, where it's like, you could see them all like, wait, how could we slow down chasing this guy right now? He just killed our whole town of people, but it's like they kill an innocent man, in doing that. There's no stopping and listening to Judy Greer trying to tell them to stop.
I mean, the mob mob mentality is such a useful construct, I guess, to show how quickly we can kind of ride a wave.
Well, I think that's
a misintended wave.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you. Is when what we're angry at is a mob, that is when it's easiest for us to fail to see we are falling under mob mentality on our own.
Yeah. Yeah. And like the power of, what do you even call this? Like, it's like cheerleading, like you get in a room of people, like humans are crazy, like around this type of stuff. Like I've watched, there's some really interesting, like, sort of social experiment type stuff out there that you can, just find on YouTube. But like, it's kind of the thing, like we're so programmed to fall in line with the group as humans. Like that's a largely consistent thing throughout human culture. And obviously not every single individual is as susceptible. There's a scale to that. But a large swath of humans are so easily suggested into following the group. So like one of the kind of classic experiment examples is all it takes is one person standing in front of a closed door on a public street as if they're waiting to go in. And
I
people
saw
will
one,
line up behind them.
I saw one that was like people in a waiting room and everyone stood when a beep went off. And like everyone who'd come in the joining room and observed everyone else doing. So, okay, I don't mean this to toot my own horn because there's pluses and minuses to it, but I've never been someone to like, if I see a mob running somewhere, I run the other direction. I'm one of those people.
I think that's
for better
an
or worse.
And important thing to know about yourself, right? Like I tend to, as well, shy away from the group like mentality or group speak or sort of the wave. If a wave starts happening, I'm like, I don't know. I'm going to step back and just see where this goes. But that,
right.
That's just who we are, I think, to varying degrees.
Well,
so I guess what I'm getting at is you can't fault people for that because it's so ingrained. It's such a human thing. But the tragedy of that is such that you can't fight it in a lot of ways, which it's sort of doubling down on this bigger theme of like, you really are powerless in a lot of ways. Like we as people are just powerless to those things, to those forces.
But what we aren't powerless to, which is so smart, it puts in this movie what Tommy Doyle represents, leading the mob and everything. That moment after he realizes that he just let a mom and killed an innocent person, they're kind of stuck there. It's like, well, what do we do? What do I do? And it's basically like that's the example of stepping into that unknown. You may F up along the way, but what he does is he says, you know what? I see what I just did, but now I'm just going to try to keep doing the right thing, but just from a different place. Like maybe if a woman's screaming at me to stop, I'm going to stop and listen to her now, whatever it may be. But just to touch on again real quick, what I was talking about, how myself, even though if I don't relate to the mob, what this movie still hits me on a certain level of getting me to like rile up and then look at that exactly what I don't agree with bubbling up in myself. But there is that moment in the scene, they're chasing down the guy. The mob's chasing down the guy, where it's like when Lori, it's when she basically re-injures herself. Like the mob's going crazy. There's like a doctor who's joined them, or like a nurse who's joined them, and is just looks manic in the face and is just running forward. And Lori's just kind of yelling at them to stop. And he kind of gets up in her or whatever on accident, just in his craziness. And she like knees him and basically makes him buckle over and fall to the ground. And I was just feeling so much frustration at just like wanting to put a wall up against this mob and just, you know, yell at them with a loudspeaker.
Right.
That like when she did that and just like physically hurt one of these people, I felt myself like getting that tinge of like, yeah, take that. But then immediately horrified at myself that's how the cycle continues, you know, just trying to catch myself in that. Exactly.
It's so smart because at its core, what motivates us as humans in our brains to get into the line or follow the mob or ride the wave or whatever is the fear of not doing the right thing. So it's again, it is a fear-based motivation, which is the theme of this movie.
Well, and that's the problem therein is like, but what about when you're trying to do the right thing in a sort of system and by methods of which are no longer working or never, you know, aren't the way to build this new world we're talking about, right? Or a new method or approach. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, but I think that's sort of that's a bigger that's a bigger question.
Well, no, I mean, just like what you're saying, you know, meaning how despite, you know, even though you mean well, I'm just looking at all the other stuff that's caught up. You know, why it's like you just how, you know, you don't want to, why you can empathize with people who still be that way. Like the firefighters at the beginning, I thought was so smart as another example that was kind of like same but different from the mob. Like they're doing exactly what their job is at the beginning, putting out a fire and looking for survivors no matter what. But again, we have Lori screaming in the back of the truck, let it burn, let it burn. But just because of firefighters, how they're operate or whatever, there's no, it's like that there was no room for that in that situation for them to ever be stopped. You know, I don't know, just that was just a little example of like they're doing the right thing, but just the details of the situation just needed that little bit more of nuance that for whatever reason the chaos just it doesn't allow for.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is everything. It comes down to nuance and context and information.
And a lack thereof in these situations.
Right, and that's the horror of it all. That's the horror of the mob mentality. They don't have the bigger picture context or information to actually behave properly, and it just runs rampant. That's what it all kind of boils down to. And we see, like, society does this all the time. There's so many movies and stories about this type of thing, right? Like the end of Rebel Without a Cause. The cops shoot Sal Mineo because he's got a gun, but James Dean comes out and says, yeah, but I have the bullets.
You're always spoiling the end of Rebel Without a Cause on the show.
I know. Well, it's one of those movies for me. But that's just that's the lesson. We as a society, we're constantly jumping to a certitude or a comfort in the certitude without the broader context or understanding or information or whatever to make a reasoned decision.
And so, like, to jump with that mob to the end of the movie, and which just works to hammer all that home, like filmically, everything. Like, yes, so then, we have the mob's clearly in its position of power. It's wanted all along. They can finally just beat and stab to death the evil, as, they refer to it as. But then what do we see happens? It's evil. Evil itself is represented in this body, and their exact attempt to try to control something that's an uncontrollable force that is manifested in this body. As we say, it only makes it grow stronger. And I mean, just to get into like how that plays out a bit on a film level, I just love that. And I just realized it was kind of similar to the beginning of the 2018 one when they first meet Michael outside. And it's just like this rapid cutting, just kind of building and building in energy. That's essentially what was happening here, where it's just basically the building up a fervor of Michael being of evil being recharged by evil. And just sort of in the way it builds, where it's just the cutting and then culminating in killing the mob off, and then killing Judy Greer off. Sorry, I always forget her character name. She's just so
Karen.
Judy Greer. Karen. Right. She's wearing a Christmas sweater the whole movie. It's so good.
I know.
But yeah, no, I mean, just the way that whole ending, filmically, story-wise, context-wise, just hammered home all that we're talking about, and just all those ideas of, evil trying to kill evil.
Yeah, and just to backtrack to Tommy, something that really, I think, bakes your noodle is that in the moment that Tommy realizes that he messed up and that there was a consequence, like an innocent person died, the group, everybody around him forgives it. They sort of go, oh, whoops, it's a whoopsie. And he's allowed to make up for it. He's given permission to say, well, how do I make it right? That permission is something that Michael, as a 6-year-old, was not given. Right? Like, society just said, nah, you screwed up. See you later. You don't get to have any sort of forgiveness. You don't get to repent. You don't get to apologize. You're out. You're in the cage. And so having those two things kind of up against each other is really telling to me. It's sort of like speaking to all of this stuff. It's like, oh, so when the adult does it, no problem. Just forgive him and let him carry on. Obviously, he suffers the consequences of that. But when the little kid does it, no, he's just pure evil. And I just think those ideas up against each other are really evocative, because what are we doing? Right? Like, as a society, what are we doing? Well,
I think there's even more to glean from the context of the mob situation when you touch on the poor other escaped mental patient and everything with him, because, and this actually could be a good way to kind of also just group into how transition a bit more into just in general how tragedy plays a part in this film. But just specifically a little more in the context of this situation as a metaphor for society, yada yada. That escaped mental patient, Tim, like that whole scene with him, like I think I was borderline tears, like feeling for him, and just how scary it is. Absolutely horrifying. And like the way, I mean, it's so especially tragic, and it was just so smart to have it start with him making his way to the hospital after getting in an accident because he was just chased, like doesn't know how to drive a car, clearly is, stunted or whatever, has disabilities, but he knows he's gotten to the hospital and all he's doing is screaming, help me. Like, that's just like what really got under my skin. Cause you take the mob representing the sort of most angry, that angry fervor of anything that's politicized, whatever, maybe choose any side. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. It's just the idea of, approaching wherever it is from that, again, this mob violence is okay place, that that one lone guy for me represented like, well, what if it's represented like the idea of that's someone on the other side in a way. Like they're othering this individual to the point of like, that is the thing. We want to defeat a thing. So the means of doing that is to kill the person that thing is in. Right.
Yeah.
So
culturally, we've like humans have been doing that. They've been othering people forever and just massacring them because they look or represent a thing that is different from themselves. I mean, that's so crazy, but so a part of humanity.
I think what I wanted to say, about what that helped me, why it's so tragic, I think, is because that's essentially, again, it doesn't matter what side or if it's the right or wrong side or anything like that, but essentially anyone at any given time when you're expressing that kind of, passion, you are just saying, help me. I feel like in this world, anything that is politicized, you basically have these two sides that are screaming, help me. And then there's the other one that's essentially just, but his approach is to do anything but just to chase him down and want to kill him.
And it's always problematic when it doesn't really even matter which side, but when the voices that are speaking out are actively ignoring all the information, right? They've determined a point of view, and anything that deviates from that is against you or the problem or whatever. And that's just not how you should look at the world, right? But the mob helps facilitate you locking into that.
Yeah.
It's this. Here's the thing. This is what bothers me about people being like, that movie sucked. Like, we've just spent a good hour talking about just the thematic aspect of a mob. Like, if you walked out of this movie and you were like, I don't like it, then I'm sorry, but I want to be like, don't go to movies.
You heard it here first, folks.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
What are you there for then? I mean, look, everybody, I mean, that's kind of a shit thing for me to say, but you go to a movie to get whatever you want to get out of it, and I'm totally fine with that. But like, if you go to a movie and want to completely turn your brain off, more power to you. But like, don't then come back to a movie that was thought-provoking and say it sucked.
Or it didn't do anything new with the franchise.
Yeah, get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
know,
here's what I think we should do, because we've talked a lot about this. I think we should dig into the Strode and beat by beat kind of kill aspect of this movie.
All right, I can get us there by being where we just were. If we were just talking about overall, trying to transition into the sense and weight of tragedy in general in this film, I will say, like, of course, that was an escaped mental patient. I mean, we touched on the ending with Karen being killed. That's huge. We have now the daughter with no parents left. But the kill that I think, got to be aside from those was when, you have the little posse made up of the almost victims from the past.
Yeah.
And it was the woman who is the girl. Yeah, what you said her name earlier, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Having those people die was just like really got to me, where it's like this idea of almost of surviving an attack by a murderer, and then to only 40 years later be killed by them still after having them already affected your whole life. Just that idea that your whole life is just kind of like so dictated by this outside force. Like it was inevitable all along. There was just something especially tragic and gruesome about her death. And I think there's another death like that in it.
Well, I just want to victim blame them really badly right now to say, guys, a really easy way to not get killed by Michael Myers is to not think that you can go kill him.
Well, that's exactly it. Because like you're empathizing with them when they do think, they're sort of finding the strength within them is what it feels like. Right. Of like, no, we're teaming up together to defeat evil. But again, like we talked about, it doesn't quite work that way with Michael Myers.
It doesn't, and the previous movie even sort of solidifies that. Laurie spent 40 years preparing, and she still failed. You think you four knuckleheads, who half of which have never even like held a gun, are a match for this guy? Get out of here.
That was something really cool that I like. Made this transition to Bora's other stuff in the film going on. But as far as like expanding on like the story and whatnot of like, where is this going to go after the first one, to, of course, having it take place the same night. But then you're thinking like, since we're dealing with it all real time, a kind of like, well, what's going on here that I was wondering alongside with the first one is like, well, how is this news getting out to the rest of the town and how are they going to react to it? So it was just one of those like perfect sequel, just kind of like building from this context that then is all rooted in the context of the original Halloween.
Right.
But there was just something so fun about the meeting the town in the bar on Halloween 40 years later and being with them as the news seeps out of Michael Myers is back. Oh, it's so good.
I know. I mean, I just think that this whole movie is the second act of a bigger story. And so, what we usually refer to that as is the fun and games and the bad guys close in, right? Like those are sort of terms that are thrown around in screenwriting. This whole movie is just, I think this is the argument a lot of people are getting, kind of, or they're misinterpreting this movie. They're thinking it's supposed to be a Laurie versus Michael movie again. And it's not. I mean, it's not at all. It's the second act of a saga that is showing how Michael, Michael on the loose is really, really rampant and like how that affects everybody. It's the perfect encapsulation of the second act of that story. Like, and first act is Laurie, seeing Michael again. Second act is Michael running loose in town, and the third act is going to be Laurie having to actually like find a new way to combat Michael. And what I think, just to theorize, what I think the crux, or the Horcrux, if you will, of Michael Myers, that this movie really is laying the seed of, or planting the seed of, laying the groundwork for, is one of two or both icons are the things that will take Michael down. I think what Laurie needs to do is to let go of the force aspect of defeating him, get him to the house, and destroy the house or the mask or both. I think when you start to enter into the magical ideas around like what makes him, what gives him his power, it's those three things. It's right. Fear-based force as a combatant against him. Doesn't work. We know that. It just feeds him. The house, which he's constantly drawn to, and the mask, which gives him the literal barrier between his vulnerable self and us.
Well, that's the house and the mask are similar in that sense.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in this movie, there's a really cool couple moments, right? Like Laurie talks about when she like Hawkins is basically saying he's a 6-year-old. That's who he is. And it has nothing to do with you, Laurie. And she's like, but I've seen that face when she pulled the mask off in the first movie. And she's like, and she sort of does acknowledge it. She's like, he's got kind of the face of a child. He's just a child in this big body. And there's some connection in this movie to that, in that moment where she, like, the light bulb kind of goes on with her. And in the context of all of the what's going on, I think that's going to become a really important moment for the third movie. It's like her mentality is shifting, and she's going to have to battle with the loss of her daughter and that understanding in the third movie. That's my guess. But then the other moment is when Karen gets the mask off of Michael, and we don't see his face really, but she does. And it's the only moment really in the entire movie where he's actually kind of at the mercy of somebody else. So it is this movie is, to me, solidifying this notion that his most vulnerable state is unmasked. And when he gets surrounded by everybody and Karen says, gotcha, and all that, she drops the mask and allows him to pick it up and put it back on. The second he does that, like, the magic powers are reinstated. He's whatever he is again. And so to me, that there's something to that, and my, I guess, hope, maybe, rather than any idea that I know what they're going to do with this franchise, is that they will use those things as the sort of hinges of how you solve or defeat Michael. The end.
Great. I'm actually kind of glad you talking about it. These movies are paced out. Too many movies are just like, it seems like a new one's every year, shot back to back. I don't know. It's fun. It lets you chew on it a bit. Anyways, when you're talking about this being the middle one and therefore representative of the fun and games aspect of it, just want to say, yeah, I agree. That totally worked for me about this film. Maybe works for me in general about the middle films, where it's like, you know, it like, look at Empire Strikes Back. It feels like you're in the middle of the adventure. You know, there's something I really like about that in an exploratory, journeying sense. Like, think about it. It's like when you go on a trip somewhere for a week, let's say, the middle days are always going to be the best ones, you know?
Yeah.
It's that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, I just wanted to say that, not much more to say on that. But also there's something that was interesting with this being a middle one. I thought the emphasis character-wise on this one was with Karen and Tommy Doyle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting how they represent the middle generation.
That's right.
This is the middle film. I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's smart. I mean, it to the impact of what we set out to do to talk about the third installments of things, it does really, we're seeing how much it's deviating from that construct. So whatever, fine with that.
Yeah. And I actually, you just reminded me just to say, in the context of what we're talking about, the threes, if you are looking at this in the third one, in this new trilogy, new/old trilogy, timeline, whatever, it's something feels really appropriate about introducing that concept of, like, Michael Myers may or may not be supernatural in some regard with his super strength. That just feels like it's coming right at that exact point, a third one, or that's exactly what a third one would do.
Yeah, because if you take what would it be? I think it's like the Sid Field sort of way of looking at it, where it's like Act 1 is the thesis, Act 2 is the antithesis of that, and Act 3 is the synthesis of Act 1 and 2. Then yes, they're on track for that.
Yeah, totally. And just a bit more too on the way in which he is, like, he does sit back up from the ground. Like, it's easy to call it magic and supernatural, but it's really incredible the level of that the movie handles it, where we have such a grounded, realistic tone to this whole film. Yet I think when that does happen, it is a transition of sorts, but it doesn't skew so far it feels like it's left that realism. It feels like more, it's somehow just in the lines of, like, you hear those crazy cases of, you know, someone surviving a gunshot in the head kind of thing.
Right.
You know, where it feels like it's somehow just this sort of natural order is at work. That's because Michael Myers is evil incarnate. It's like a natural order is what is keeping him alive. Less so that it's something explicitly magic or supernatural. And maybe that's where those lines between those things blur, is like of inevitability, a force at work. Like what that inevitability is, a force at work, like all that. So I just thought that just how all that was handled was just so well done and got me so pumped for the next one too. And I don't know, it stays grounded, at least in this film. Despite that,
I mean, maybe
it's not so cut and dry magic. Yeah.
Part of what maybe keeps us grounded, maybe to me in this one, man, is just the sheer brutality.
I was going to say, you brought up the kills. That's we better touch on those at least.
I'm not even sure I remember which one it was. I think it might have been the knife up through the eye and head of the husband in that scene with they're all in their Halloween costumes in the car when Michael's jumped on the car. Yep. And he gets in there and shoves that knife like up through his eye into his brain. I let out such a loud noise. Like, I like, and throughout there, almost every single kill, I was like pretty moved by, like,
oh my God.
As well as you can say that in a good way.
It's just because they were just so, like you said, brutal's the perfect word for it. Like the couple at the beginning, when you have the dude who like, you remember the older couple at the beginning, the first victims of his second escape now. Right. The way that Michael Myers punches his hand through the sort of window door or whatever it is, and then repeatedly smashes the guy's head.
That's his move.
Like against the wall. Right. It's just so, God, it's just so, brutal. And then, and then using the light bulb, what are those called? The fluorescent lights. to stab the woman up under the neck. I know each kill was just like, oh my God, which there's something really to be said when that works consistently, and it's because you can get pretty desensitized to it in slashers, or like it is more just in the Friday the 13th movie. There's kind of like a gleefulness to it that makes us feel like conflicted and sick, but is still fun on some level. But like you're killing off, like we talked about, sort of stereotypes in a way in a Friday the 13th movie. Here, they're effectively and they're successfully doing their goal of like, no, these are people that we are feeling and empathizing with just as real people out in the world.
I think the strength of this depiction is that it, at its core, Michael is an unstoppable thing. And so when you put anybody up against that, we know that they're screwed. And so the terror of it, what makes it scary and makes it exciting, is just the glimmer of hope that they might get a few swipes in. But we know they're screwed. Like, there's no way. And so there's something that, like, the ride that you go on with each one of these is you kind of get fooled into thinking, well, maybe they have a chance. They don't.
Yeah.
And it's so, I just feel like every kill is so well constructed in that way that it's like, it's pretty ridiculous, but like every kill essentially has a beginning, middle, and end to it. Right? I think sometimes maybe in lesser versions of the slasher film sort of world, you don't get that. You just kind of get, oh, they're dead, they're slashed, they're whatever, and it becomes gratuitous in sort of the moment of the act. Whereas for some reason in this, it's just so good at set up, conflict and delivery of the kill. Every time each one of them feels complete. There's no kind of like half-assed kills.
Anyone that's standing out to you right now in your memory?
I mean, the ones we meant, the light bulb one is quite intense. The one I mentioned with the knife up the eye, but I mean, the boyfriend, that, and it's that I think a smart thing they do. It'd be interesting to go back and just sort of like pace out each kill, because I feel like they slowly add more and more struggle into each of the kills as the movie goes on.
Yeah,
like they're just a little bit more, maybe not every kill, but like the main ones.
Well, yeah, no, it works because as you go along, you want the kerfuffles to have more stakes at hand as far as the main characters. You know, more the characters are more main as we go on, so therefore the sort of sequences themselves become that much more kind of intricate and stretched out.
Right. I mean, the boyfriend one that's intricate. It goes on and on and on and on and on, and then it's over. But nope, it's not over, because he's got to just like finalize it as he walks by down the stairs.
I love he's in that dress the whole time.
That's right. Yeah, it's the same night, you know. Well, I change.
Well, actually, or anything more on the deaths or that.
No, I mean, it seems weird to say this, but they're really like pleasing. Like they're just done well.
Absolutely. Yes. Well, no, why I was just going to transition what you said there. It's like, yeah, you know, no need to change the clothes. There's such a specific appeal in that for me of like, you know, Judy Greer is in that same Christmas sweater the whole movie.
Right.
Like there's something so much fun about it. I mean, just in the practical sense of just the actors imagining like, here's your action figure get up, you know, that kind of thing. Here's your iconic, whatever.
Right.
But just also in the sense of it just working where like, it's just a prong of giving weight to the night itself. And it's there for me, like it's the ways in which the movies like live up to the title, Halloween. You know, it's about a night, and like the way that this movie stays true to that and then, you know, carries it even further as you want sequels to do is incredible. So you see why, yeah, like characters wearing the same clothes is just a small kind of aspect of that. But just I don't know. I hate the idea of like saying like the night is like a quote character in the film. It's not quite that, but it's like, for me, I think it's more accurate to put it like the setting of the night and the town has character that we're like getting to sort of expand on, and just sort of, you know, a new legend is being played out before our eyes, kind of thing. Like I don't know. I just like I love that aspect and everything therein of like, this is all one night. It's Halloween night. It's called Halloween. Let's do it.
Yeah, and of course we go into the following morning, so it's technically November 1st for most.
You mean it's still night though?
But it's still night. Yeah, exactly. So
that's what matters. Great. It's still the same night.
Right. No, it's very cool. What else is good to talk about? I mean, I feel like we've pretty well covered most things. There's just fun. There's just fun in the movie. I love the guys who have bought the Michael Myers house and have like turned it into kind of their own little spooky realm.
Yeah,
of course, on Halloween they would.
They were really likable. It's fun. They did take spins. We did get to spend some time with them.
The other thing that sort of is to that point that I quite enjoyed about this movie is that it has humor in it that the first or the previous one doesn't really have. Like they laid into a bit more of the like, what would you call it? Maybe irreverence of just characters. And like, it's got some fun. It's got some jokes.
The little boy being babysat in the first one is kind of all there is in the first one.
Right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So I just thought it was fun. It like broke it up. It made it, because I think if you don't have that in this movie, it's just depressing.
Well, it's nice because it's that level of which like you stay grounded and with characters as real people, obviously. But so it's just sort of taking that approach of like, no, well, people are funny. People can be quippy and charming and interesting, and we just don't need a lot to see that at play.
I love that little group of kids that are the trick-or-treaters that like pull the prank with the razor blade in the
you mean the little
like,
jerks?
That cracked me up. Of course they get it later, but
yeah. Actually, well, I mean, I have one last kind of bigger thing that was can connect to all the themes that we are already talking about, but just something that is a little bit, maybe I want to push back against the kind of, you get naysayers, with a lot of these reboot / years later sequels or whatever that are just kind of always like, well, whatever, let this lie, it's been enough kind of thing. But like this, like Bill and Ted 3, like the later Rocky movies and Creed movies, I think there's ways where you build in the ideas of, older people to the stories themselves. And I just think it's so important. Especially, like, just about stuff in the world that I see that's important to me, like for whatever reason, just an ism that's out there that I've just been, I don't know, always aware of, and does get a lot of love, I guess. All the isms is ageism, and that's, I feel like it's just so I don't know, so present, something that's still just like always grappling with a lot. And a big part of that is just that idea of, older people. It doesn't have to be that like old, basically like anyone over 60. Like it's like 50, like whatever, not even old people, but just not the kind of, you get what I'm saying, that there's just not being portrayed as being people, but as an old person. So just that what this movie did as far as that connection to the past, like sounds like sad and obvious, but I think it does do a lot in our world today just to sort of show what should be obvious, but that's like, well, these quote unquote old people, like they were just as people as someone who's younger. Like it sounds so like, I don't know, harsh and obvious, but I mean that is the case. And it's nice to kind of have that shoved, in front of you in a way of being like, no, they aren't like, they haven't always just been I don't know, just it's the way like a lot of the times movies present older people without agency or like just having not led a life. So just something, I don't know, I just really, really appreciated with this one of like seeing them 40 years ago. And it's something that number, like 40 years ago, I don't know, it's like that's that big enough number where I think you can do these things that, I'm sort of bringing up here of just sort of say, like, yeah, but like in a lot of ways that's a long time ago. Like to think 40 years from now is going to be 2061, like that puts it into perspective. Think how futuristic and crazy that sounds. But same time, it's not long ago at all. Yeah, I don't know. I guess not more to say on that. You get the gist of what I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree. It's important to tell the stories of people that aren't, 25 or whatever, have them and have the story not be about them being old.
Yeah, well, just also they were 25 too. Like just exactly. That, just as simple as that.
Yeah. Cool, man. I mean, there's stuff I like, lots of stuff I guess I could talk about more. Oh, one little tiny detail, just the look of Michael's mask post-fire and how he survives the fire, I loved, because he hides in the gun vault, Which
Yeah.
I think I've never had guns, so I'm not well versed in this, but I'm just going to guess that by code or just by your own safety protocol, your little gun closet should be fireproof. So very smart.
But just the visuals, him coming out of the fire.
Oh, baby. Yeah, the look of the movie is great. The look of the mask, burnt mask, man, design is great.
Mentioned the firefighters, but that whole sequence killing off the firefighters was so good.
Yeah,
so good.
They didn't hold back.
Yeah, just shout out a couple characters too that I enjoyed. Getting the return of Loomis, I thought was done just right. Like
it worked,
to first hear his voice. I don't know how much they like CG'd Loomis' face onto that guy that they had, whatever. But it was just done in that kind of classy, seamless, not in your face way. That was just really connected it back to that movie. That night was so much fun. And then also shout out to, rest in peace from the first one. Actually, talk about some comic relief in the first one, would say is the dad character, Ray, who is killed in the first one. I love that actor, Toby Huss.
I do too.
And this is so much fun getting that little glimmer of who he was a bit more, where the family friend, that guy, tells the story of like, oh yeah, your dad used to sell me peyote.
Yeah, that's good.
How perfect. Keep his memory alive. That was fun. And
I saw him in my grocery store once, and I was like, man, you're great. I didn't say anything because I don't believe in going up to celebrities, or celebrities, whatever. They're just people. But I was pleasantly surprised to see someone I admire.
Yeah, it's always the ones at that level that are the most exciting.
Hell yeah.
The Adventures of Pete and Pete veterans, exactly. Seinfeld veterans. Yeah, man. I think that covers it for me too. So
cool.
We can move on and see if there was anything in our next section here that did not work.
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
I just enjoyed it for what it was. I think the only thing that I kind of walked out thinking was, well, two things, and they're kind of related to each other. If your expectation going in was to see Laurie Strode battle Michael Myers, you're going to be disappointed because that's not this movie.
But we got that in the first
in
one.
What?
We got that in the first one.
Well, I know, but I think a lot of people are thinking, and maybe this is the fault of the PR, like the trailer makes it look like she's gearing up again to fight him. And she doesn't. That's not this movie. So if that's your expectation, sorry, that's just not what you're going to get. And I thought to myself, well, we'll get it in the third movie. So it's not really what didn't work, but I guess the representation of that possibility in the PR didn't work for me.
It's funny. I didn't get that. And for me, it's just so built in of like, okay, this is a trilogy or a quadrilogy in the canon. So we'll keep saying, but, the first one makes sense. You have their "we've meet again" fight. Mm-hmm. The second ones, they're separated. So, and then so that way they can come back together for the third one. I mean, this is just spot on. Like, I wouldn't want it any other way.
Agreed. So, but to sort of tangential to that is from a very zoomed out perspective, I think what this movie lacks, if you're going to criticize it, is the feeling of a main character. Like, I'm not saying you have to have that, but there's a part of me that thought, okay, this is a little bit more Karen's movie. The first one was very much Allison and Laurie's movie to me, and Karen was sort of like the sub character to them. In this one, it was because of how it ends with Karen being kind of the solve, saving her daughter, but ultimately getting killed, it felt a little bit more like her movie. And she has her moments, but I felt a little untethered from that feeling of I'm on the ride through the eyes of this one character. Having said that, you don't need it. It's not necessary. But during the first viewing, I kind of was like, who am I supposed to latch onto? And in this one, I was like, is it Tom? Like, is Tommy kind of the person now that we're latching onto? No, he has his moments too. But this is an ensemble movie full on. And so if you're looking for that ain't going to be in there either.
So let me ask, is that instinct of asking who am I supposed to be following most here, latching on to, is that just a default thing that you'll ask, or is there something that could have been done in this film that would have smoothed out the edges so you wouldn't even be wanting that in the first place?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it is a instinctual default thing for me, but once I realize that that's not what's happening, well, if I know that's not what's happening, I'm fine with it, obviously. But because of the context of the first and second movie, the original and the last one, being very Laurie-centric, I guess the previous one, the 18 one, is more Allison-centric, probably. But even in that, it does that, right? Like we follow Allison and we kind of experience the new world through her eyes in the 2018 one. And so I think the presumption going in is that you're going to get some aspect of that, and we don't. I mean, you could make the argument that movie 1 is Laurie, movie 2 is Allison, and movie 3, this one, is Karen. But it doesn't quite hit. We don't see, like, the turns in the movie are not based on Karen's decisions. So I don't know. Is that a bad thing? No, but it just is a thing.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm not just heaping praise for no reason, but I really do feel like I wouldn't want it any other way for this movie. Never was I distracted or questioned, like, oh, who am I supposed to be following here? Like, this felt like exactly how I'd want the middle film to feel, where we are just sort of, it feels like you're watching a Stranger Things almost more. Like, there's no main character in that. It's just sort of like we have our main characters, these tri-generational characters, and at any given point, we're going to be with one of them. And on top of that, where I will maybe, use that phrase of saying not an individual as a character in this film, I really do think the town is the character in this film. This is the film that is about group, town trauma, whatever. And you just feel that, like those scenes in the hospital where they're sort of gathering storm and feeling up, and that scene at the bar, like here's like what really makes me think like the town as character. That first scene in the bar, we aren't just setting up Tommy Doyle. It's like that bar represents of like, this is the town's watering hole. The town is a character. This is the scene where we meet the town representative in this handful of people. So that, I mean, that really did work as like a singular, something just kind of follow more so. They were the ones sort of literally driving around trying to kill him. And then that just coupled, I just accept the trio of women as our main characters.
Right.
And because of the unique format of this, I don't know, that would have felt weird to me to sort of be like latching on to one perspective more than the others.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it works. My instincts were wrong, I think is what it was. And then now, you get to have a day or whatever I've had since watching it and go, no, that's fine.
Okay, so if you're just talking about possible first viewing, things, like I definitely got held up, but I think by one of those, which is like, I'd be curious to, on a second viewing, see if I could just follow, like it was effective, yet at the same time, like it was just so much that the ending, I did feel like a bit like, whoa, where were we, like overwhelmed in a kind of jumbled way. were just like, I kind of just lost track a little bit of like, oh wait, how did he get over to where Karen is? Wait, how did she get to where she is? And then that end beat, it just felt like it kind of ended like, I don't know, I just wanted to hang on something a little longer or something like that. But anyways, I feel like
didn't massage her death.
Okay. Well, and even, yeah, that and just like the cutting to the, you know, end credits moment. I just, something felt a little much, or just, I didn't on a first viewing, just like it was both working, but then I also at the same time wasn't totally following it. Anyway, small thing. I feel like kind of like how the beginning of the 2018 one worked a lot better for me a second time through. I feel like this ending, knowing what it is, that manic energy it's building, I'll sort of be able to plug in a little better, since it is kind of doing a lot. It can be a lot first time.
You know what they could have done that may have been effective too, since this is a sequel of a trilogy? You could cliffhanger. They could have cliffhangered this much harder. It's a cliffhanger to know that Laurie has got to find out, and Allison need to find out that Karen is killed. But what if Karen had been standing in the window and stepped to leave that spot, turned around, and Michael was there, and he raised the knife, and then we cut there to black. And that's the end credits.
Sorry, Tim. I hate it. I don't want it at all.
I'm a big fan of the unanswered ending.
Well,
especially in this context of like a the end of the second movie. Like you start up the next movie with her getting brutally killed. This true cliffhanger.
This for me is the kind of cliffhanger I want, where it's like the movie ends on a note of what it is about so hard. Like we already, praised what that ending is doing, of just like, this is all about, it's almost like a ritual of just building up Michael Myers as evil. And like, that's what this is about, this one. So just to sort of have the ending, just like ride out on that note, and that, I don't know, whatever that is. Like that was the ultimate like hype tease for the next, not kind of like, oh my God, there's Luke holding out the lightsaber or whatever. Like, I don't care. Like, you don't need to do that. Just stop. Anyway, sorry. Yes.
You don't need to get so like dismissive of it, Ryan. It's just an idea. You don't have to like it.
No, just treat it as I love it for how it is.
Fair enough.
What
everything. Else? That's it. I mean, I really don't have anything else that didn't work. I mean, I rode the movie.
There were some things where this may be like a second viewing thing will be better, but like it's such a hard line to walk of those, when you like all the kills in this movie, these kinds of movies, where it's like you want a good kind of frustrating and not a bad kind of frustrating, with just sort of like how those specifics play out, sort of moment by moment, of when someone's trying to escape, or when someone, tries to fight Michael Myers back. Like, are you yelling at them in a good way or the bad stereotypical horror movie way? You know what I mean? So I don't know. There are a couple moments where I felt like the couple at the beginning, like the woman's on her way out the door, then like doesn't go out, and then I'm like, well, why didn't she just keep going? And I was like, okay, well, I get it. If you're just so shocked and traumatized by seeing what's in front of you, you wouldn't go out. But the movie didn't exactly handle it like that. I don't know. I'm kind of just like really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, but that's such a hard line. And some things like the flashback scene when I liked this one when what's his name, the cop is shooting at when he's shooting at Michael Myers escaping, and like we see how much his hand is shaking from it having just shot his friend. We get when he goes over, like how just that timing worked out, felt right, of him like shooting and missing those two shots at Michael Myers. Right. Like that's fun, kind of frustrating. But I don't know, I just have to see it again. But I feel like there might have been a couple kills where I'm just like, you know, like what that one person did in the car, where like was great. It's like, yes, just get out of the car, just like run. You know, it's like it's when you're projecting yourself as if you'd be that much calmer,
Right.
and could rationally think. But I don't know. I have to see it again, but I feel like there are a couple moments that might have been bordering on not as fun, frustrating with how the characters were acting in the moment. We'll see.
Yep.
But no, it's paid.
Cool.
Totally overrides. Still, it's overridden by All That Did Work. And this is one of the best movies that we've watched in our batch of 100 plus here. Meaning, if looking at the first 100 episodes as one grouping, and now this next 100 as the next batch, like this was really wowed by this film.
Yeah, I liked it.
Well, should we wrap up a bit more and see if we have any things of note?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
All right, Ryan, did you hear? There's a part of me that doesn't even want to mention this because I think mentioning it is adding to the problem.
Okay.
But I'll do it anyway because that's what we're doing. There was a petition that someone created because that they asked that the opening sequence of the firemen getting killed be removed from the movie because it's offensive to firefighters.
Was I borderline saying firefighters are incompetent at the beginning?
No, I'm no, not at all. I'm only speaking to what I would consider a mentality of taking things too far. In that, if the idea that you want to petition to have things removed from a movie because they ruffled your personal feathers is so crazy to me that I can't even comprehend why. I mean, I'm doing it by doing this, by talking about it, but like why it even got press coverage.
Yeah.
Like the world we live in now will cover that kind of absurd, reaction to a movie.
I just, again, love these thought exercises. I don't want to actually really maybe do it, but just if these people starting the petition, I'd be like, okay, cool. Here, you write or rewrite the script and be sure no one's could be offended by anyone getting killed in this. Have at it. Would it just be Michael Myers sitting
playing
there?
the guitar?
What would...
Just
I don't know.
Michael sitting on a log.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel in a weird place, being
It's
the
so
privileged
ridiculous.
person I am, to bring up stuff like this. But I will say that is noteworthy, though.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know where
about
else to
this
put
film.
it. There was another petition in response to this petition, and I forget what it said, but it basically said a petition to say that this other petition is stupid or something like that. And it got more signatures than the original.
The petition that says this petition is stupid. No, I mean, that ties. I mean, why? God, it's why if you think that you've just signed up for the wrong movie. I think it's actually there's a cool interview with Jamie Lee Curtis on Deadline here, but they talked about they use this word too, but the brutality in these films, touching on that, and I like what Jamie Lee Curtis said on that. People are going to lose their minds. This movie is beyond brutal. It doesn't push the envelope. It doesn't shred the envelope. The envelope doesn't even exist. It has pulverized it. It's graphic in a way these movies have not been, and it's graphic and brutal in that way because the world right now is graphic and fucking brutal. Quote Jamie Lee Curtis. Yeah, so I mean, looking at it from that angle, are you then going to say, "Oh, but we can't kill firefighters"? This movie's, the envelope does not exist, and I think in horror, that's where we go for that kind of thing.
Yeah, you're allowed to not spend your money on a thing. You go for it.
Yeah. which I do with a lot of things. That's, I think, what you can immediately do in your life is...
Man, I have a friend who we were out after we had a little screening, and we went across the street to some random bar, and we walked in and sat down. And when the waitress came by to see what we wanted, just drinks wise or whatever, sitting at a table, my friend was like, I'm not going to spend my money here. Like, there's just something about this place. I'm really particular about like where I actually put my money into, like my enjoyment of my life. And this place, the vibe is not right for me. And so she just was like, I'm good. Didn't order anything. And like, they went somewhere else. And I'm like, all right. Like, I respect that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're not feeling it, you don't have to participate. You can leave.
Like me and Ralph's.
Like every time you go to the grocery store.
Well, I don't.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's just like this idea that you are somehow like, it's like the world is holding a gun to your head to participate in things. You don't have to participate, guys. It's okay. One of the greatest moments in my life was this like euphoric realization that when I was out and about, like in a social setting, and I started to not feel like I wanted to continue to participate, I could leave. And I remember like the moment I had that realization, I was probably like, oh, I don't know, in my late 20s or something like that. And I just was like, oh, I could just turn around and walk out the door and go home at any time. Like, I have permission. I'm giving myself permission to do that. And when I started doing that, it's not like it happens very often, but I used to do the other thing where I felt like I had to stick around because I had to like be there and participate, and it would be somehow rude or just, I don't know what the word would be. It would be like insensitive or something to just be like, yeah, I'm out of here. Because it's, I'd be disappointing other people. Like, fuck off. Live your life. You can do whatever you want. Just don't be an asshole.
Tim, listeners, I haven't been to a Trader Joe's in years.
For good reason.
No, all the love to them. It was just time we parted ways, apparently, of no outward intention by me. It just, wasn't meant to be anymore, apparently.
Yeah.
So, well, on Halloween Kills, Tim, the only other thing I had is I thought that was interesting. Like I think I said it earlier, maybe when we started these, like, I want to say now, like in David Gordon Green, like we have faith just because of how much I thought he killed Halloween Kills, but I was kind of complaining about like, oh God, but these are slasher movies, which makes me like, do they really have to do 3 new Exorcists if that's his next, 45 years later, whatever sequel? But I don't know. I'm warming up to it a bit. As soon as I started looking at, and this is what Halloween Kills allowed me to do, but looking at like these sort of planned trilogies, let's say in this example, as something between a movie and a limited series event, let's say, like Queen's Gambit, whatever, like it. I don't know. Looking at it in terms of that, I feel like I can get on board. Like what we're talking about with this as an isolated trilogy. This is the fun and games one. We're going to have this. The first act is the first confrontation, Michael Myers and Laurie. Then we're going to, I don't know. Because I always push back against that for a movie when it's something like, I don't know, just when it's not done well and it's kind of like, it feels like they're holding back on the stakes or something like that. Or there's kind of a presumption that isn't working out of that they can just keep making, any more of whatever franchise and it's all good and fine. But I don't know when it is approached in this way. I don't know. It's just the sort of interesting way I thought right now where the end, I mean, the medium's the same, but the end length, I don't know, delivery package, what you'd call it. Those are just starting to blend and blur more and more in today's media landscape. yeah, so I don't know, just sort of recognizing and wrapping my head around that is interesting. This movie allowed me to do, to be like, okay, yeah, this is between a movie and a Netflix thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it every attempt at doing a thing is going to have a different outcome. Like, this is just a testament to these filmmakers succeeding at being able to put out their vision of a thing that they wanted to do. And, you know, that there's a lot wrapped up in that, whether, you know, the studio just said, do your thing, and like let them go and allowed them to do what they wanted. Or I don't know the circumstances, or the studio got in there and was like, here's how we can improve on this. And they happened to land correctly so far, I think. And it seems like you think, and a lot of other people do, and a lot of other people don't. But like, there's a market for it. People want this. It's making a lot of money. A lot of people are going to see it. So great. Like, it worked. You know what didn't work? Fantastic Beasts. Oh, well. Like, sometimes it doesn't land. Part of a huge franchise, and it just didn't land right. Oh, well. That's okay.
Right.
Some people like it, but like, critically and sort of, you know, financially speaking, it didn't really do what they wanted. Oh, well.
Yeah. It's interesting what makes these films work, these new Halloween films work. It's when it's in conversation with itself as a franchise in a way, you know, and like all we talked about with this film, like that's its place in our world, which to kind of, I don't know, wrap up, I just thought was interesting. You said you saw the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that was a really good, just kind of like, just comparison, very different films, but I think they're really apt comparisons to make to each other, or to see how they're doing the same thing when we're talking about these iconographic characters that came to be in a time, in a world when violence on screen wasn't something we like winced at. You know, when we could get involved in a James Bond movie, like killing the bad guys and just sort of only see them as the bad guys, you know, like in this film, you know, killing these slasher characters. He's the bad guy. But so that was, I don't know, just point where you see that too in the new James Bond movie. Super interesting, in conversation with just itself of like, what is James Bond anymore? Does it have to completely change? How do we kind of like, and I think what made me think of all this too, how the new James Bond is unique among the James Bonds of the Daniel Craig era, has continuity to them like a mini series.
Right.
So I just think as another interesting example in that sense of how that's another in vogue thing right now, but allows for interesting contemporary deconstruction of if and how characters brought up in an age where violence is normalized, do they still have their place, if and how they do? It's interesting.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, last little fun thing of note, we see the masks from Halloween 3 Season of the Witch making a cameo in this film, which will segue perfectly to that is what we are going to wrap up our Halloween October special with. Another Halloween film, just said it, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. So looking forward to that. Very different from
That's right. We've done
one.
our big iconic bad guy 3 movies, and now we're going to move into this other realm of whatever is going on in that.
Which is
Season of
just
the Witch.
a whole nother option for how to do a third movie. Don't even just
That's right.
Something completely different.
Total
Great.
deviation.
Well, and last bit of news, if you made it this far on the dismembering horror front, just keep you posted where and I guess the world of our world, we're very excited to be joining a podcast network for the first time, a newly minted podcast network called Connected. So with that, we hope to grow and expand our family here. to new and great places. I know we will. And I guess I just wanted to say it because if you're a listener who's been with us and have made it thus far, we thank you and continue to appreciate you being here and are excited to have you on this journey, this new leg of our adventure as we grow and expand.
Yeah, it's exciting. They launched as of the release of our episode here yesterday, the 20th. So go check out all the other podcasts that they have and get into them because we're really excited. It's going to be a good time. We're going to start trying to kind of broaden our horizons here and be a part of a bigger thing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll tell you all more later and ongoing because we're excited about it. All right. Well, we could wind down even further then with any recommendations. Sorry, RecommenDEADtions. RecommenDEADtions we have. You want to go ahead real quick here, Tim?
Well, yeah, on a lighter note, I will recommend The Great British Bake Off as a show to watch.
Do they have a Halloween special you could recommend?
I doubt it. It's just, it's just good light TV.
Great.
Every season is on Netflix, I believe. There's lots of seasons. It's pretty fun, and I guess to connect it to Halloween Kills, they do use those big knives to cut a lot of these cakes. So there you go.
Great. Well, I'm going to try to stay in theme here with the genres. Not that that's not okay. They're knives, as you said. Yeah. But would you rather hear a recommendation that is a circa 2000s remake that felt like it was better than it had any right to be, or a super recent reboot that felt better than it had any right to be?
Oh, I'm curious to know what the reboot is.
Sorry. Okay. So the more recent one. They're
Yes.
both reboots, I guess. Remakes, reboots, whatever. Just because I feel like I was going to watch it in life. It's one of those movies that like, oh, I'm probably going to watch it in life. So I'll just get it out of the way. And it's October. I watched, I had watched the original The Craft for the first time, like earlier, maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
Like, great. So I was so curious, it's free to stream now. So I watched The Craft Legacy, which I just thought was going to be so terrible. It's the Blumhouse, whatever. So the characters, they weren't nearly as iconic and memorable as the original. I'm sure they're great people, whatever. The lead girl, she does carry the weight of the film well. But just like as a movie and doing stuff with the story, it was totally fun. And you could argue in a story sense, even better than the original, where like the original had the characters that this one didn't. But I'd say this one just, I don't know, it did a lot of the premise in a really fun way. Anyway, I wouldn't say it's anything mind-blowing or anything like that. But if you just, like the vibe of The Craft and all that, girls into witchcraft in high school, taking things too far, like is I mean, and who doesn't want to see that?
Yeah.
So I can give it a solid recommendation of, if you have any interest, it's maybe not going to be as god-awful as I thought. And I'll save that other one for next week, the 2000s circa one.
Cool.
Well, in closing, whether you find yourself at the beginning, middle, or end of your trilogy, thanks for listening.
That's correct. And we will see you on Halloween next time.
Goodbye.